Hi guys, how's everybody doing? I'm gonna do a video today a little bit different. I'm gonna do a video on my first impressions on the new release from Jimi Hendrix, which is this album right here. Just came out on Friday, Jimi Hendrix Both Sides of the Sky, and it's being billed as the new Jimi Hendrix album. It's a new release. Whether you consider it new depends on your own definition of that. But it's a double album. It's the latest release in the Jimi Hendrix series of, I guess, a compilation of songs, alternate takes. New in the sense that, you know, these are alternate takes of previously released songs, so they might be new in that sense, but the songs themselves are not new. And I'm going to give you my first impressions and just some information that I know about these songs and how they compare with previous versions of these songs. So to start off, I want to get two criticisms right out on the table right away. Criticisms, not necessarily my criticisms, but things that I've read from other people. So right away, a lot of people are talking about the cover, in that the photo of Jimi, which is a great photo, but a lot of people are talking about how this photo was doctored and touched up, so much so that some people think it doesn't really look like Jimi at all, or sort of a very altered version of Jimi. To me, you know, it's still Jimi. Yeah, it's been touched up. It doesn't make a big difference to me, but it is one criticism that a lot of people are posting for this album. Secondly, is this really truly a new Jimi Hendrix album? And I'll talk a little bit more about that once I get into the songs. I'm not going to talk about every single song, but I'm going to sort of group them into groups based on you know, how I view them, whether it's the personnel on each of the songs or the kinds of songs that they are, that sort of thing. But first of all, to talk about this album, this is sort of the third album that has been released of alternate takes and versions of previously released songs. The other two albums that fit into, I guess, this trilogy, if you will, back in 2010, they released this album, Valleys of Neptune, and it shares some songs with this current comp, Both Sides of the Sky. So this is 2010's Valleys of Neptune. And then in 2013, People, Hell, and Angels was released. And as you can see, all these are double albums, gatefold, great packaging, great artwork. I'm a fan of big fan of Jimi Hendrix. I'm by no means an expert on Jimi Hendrix, but I do really love Jimi Hendrix. So getting these releases are really a no-brainer for me. So those were the two previous ones that fit into this same category as Both Sides of the Sky. The way that I think these songs can be broken down on Both Sides of the Sky, and I've got some notes here just so that I remember some of the details. Some of this is coming from stuff that I've read about this album and you know, things that I've come across during the time that I've just been collecting Hendrix. So this album has 13 songs. We just released on Friday. I've listened to this multiple times already, and some of these songs, like I said, because they're alternate takes, I was already familiar with a lot of these songs. The first grouping of songs that I found on this album are songs that I like to say are studio versions of Band of Gypsys songs. So everybody knows Jimi's fourth album was a live album, Band of Gypsys. The original version of that album had 6 songs, and it was his first album that he recorded without the Experience, which was a live album that he recorded with Buddy Miles and Billy Cox. And there are several songs on here which are alternate takes of songs that were recorded by the band of Gypsys lineup in the studio. For example, there's a version of Mannish Boy, which is the Muddy Waters song. You have a very up-tempo version of that song, which differs from the version that originally appeared on the blues album that Jimi Hendrix put out called Blues, the one that has the art on the cover made up of all these different blues artists. So you got Mannish Boy, which I think is a fantastic version of that song. And I believe it's that song that in the middle of the song, the band kind of breaks into the Batman theme, which, is a cool little piece within that song. And then another couple of Band of Gypsys songs that appeared on the live album originally. You have a version of Loverman and a version of Power of Soul. And both excellent versions. My understanding is that these were recorded either just before or just after the actual Band of Gypsys live album. And the one thing that I find that's different about these songs versus the Experience is they definitely sound very Jimmy-like, but they also have a little bit more funk to them that I would say was coming through on the Band of Gypsys stuff versus the Experience material. So you have those songs. Then another grouping of songs that we have is there's 3 instrumentals on this album. And the first one is something called Jungle, which I wasn't familiar with that title before, but when I heard it, it sounded like the jam that Jimmy did called Villanova Junction, which was on the Woodstock live album that he released. Another instrumental is the song Angel, which here is retitled Sweet Angel, which I think most of you should be familiar with. So Jimmy did a vocal version of that before. I think it's on one of his comp albums. On here it's instrumental, and it's just him, Jimmy, and Mitch Mitchell. Just the two of them on this song. Excellent version. Really nice. I love Jimmy's vocals on all of his stuff, but really nice sometimes to just hear a nice instrumental version of one of his tracks. And then the last instrumental, and this one was brand new to me. I'd never heard this one before, but I think it appeared maybe on a box set or something like that before. It's a song called Cherokee Mist. Which apparently is a much shorter version of this song that appeared before. And the interesting thing about this one, again, it's Jimmy with Mitch Mitchell, but Jimmy plays sitar on this one, and really interesting to hear that, because I don't think he did that very often at all. So these 3 instrumentals are really cool. The first one that I mentioned, I forgot to say, the Jungle instrumental. Very funky song, very funky, very much a shortened version of that song from what I read where it appeared previously, but very funky, but very good. I think it's about 3 or so minutes in length, but I really enjoy all 3 of these instrumentals, and definitely worth having for me, for sure. Then there's a grouping of songs that I'd like to say are I'm going to call they're other people's songs, and not so much as cover songs, but more they're other people's songs in that those artists actually take the lead on these songs. So Jimmy plays on these songs, but he doesn't do the lead vocal on these songs, and on one of them I don't think he even plays guitar. So the first of these 3 songs is something called $20 Fine, which is a Stephen Stills song. So Stephen Stills does the lead vocal on this song, and Jimmy plays guitar on this. Then you have the song Woodstock, which I believe is from a Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young album, written by Joni Mitchell. So apparently this version was done prior to the Crosby, Stills, Nash Young version. That Joni had written the song, and Stephen Stills was really eager to try it out. So he brought it into the studio, and they did it with Jimmy. I think Mitch Mitchell was on this as well. And Jimmy doesn't play guitar on Woodstock. Jimmy just plays, Jimmy plays bass on there. Stephen Stills plays lead guitar. And then the third song that's in this category of other people's songs where they play lead is a song called Georgia Blues, which is Jimmy and somebody named, who I'm unfamiliar with, Lonnie Youngblood, who apparently was in a band with Jimmy prior to his forming The Experience. So Lonnie Youngblood sings the lead on this song Georgia Blues and plays saxophone, and Jimmy plays guitar on that. Then the last grouping of songs, there was a couple of songs that were new to me. I don't have these songs on any other of Jimmy's releases, and again, they may appear previously somewhere on box sets or something like that, but these were like fairly new songs to me. And the first one I think is appearing for the first time. It's a song called Send My Love to Linda. I don't know who Linda is, but maybe somebody can tell me. But from what I read, this song is made up of Jimmy singing this song and playing acoustic guitar, and that take was added to the band, Muddy Miles and Billy Cox and Jimmy playing an electric version of that song without Jimmy's vocals, and they took that instrumental electric version and put it together with the Jimmy vocal and acoustic guitar to form the version that's on here. So that's Send My Love to Linda. And then the other song that I had never heard before is a song called Things I Used to Do, which from what I've read is a blues cover by an artist named Guitar Slim. And I guess the notable, this is your standard blues, and the notable thing about this version is that Johnny Winter plays some slide guitar on here. So I think there's a lot to like about this version, and if you go into it without really expecting that this is like new, never heard, never released in any form kind of Jimmy songs, that's really the only way I think you'll be disappointed with this. But if you take this as, you know, these are alternate tracks, these are some rare, hard to find tracks, and some maybe you're hearing for the first time, I think this is, if you're a Jimi Hendrix fan, I think this is a no-brainer. And you know, like I said, I've only had this since Friday, but I've played it already a ton of times, and I love it. Like, there's I don't think Jimmy ever did anything that I would consider to be poor or bad. Maybe he didn't intend for some of this stuff to be released, and you know, again, that may be another criticism, that, you know, this material that never was intended for release, it's being exploited. But if it gives me more Jimi Hendrix to listen to, then, and they're packaging it in this way with this great artwork and gatefold and great pressings, then I'm more than happy to get it. So thanks a lot for watching, everybody, and I'll see you next time.